Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I think I'll get started. There may still be more people joining. My name is Karina. I am a host with Erin for the Burlington chapter in Ontario, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to interview Frieda McFadden today regarding our January pick for the gloss, the Housemaid. Um, oh, I got a blur here. So welcome, Frida. Thank you for joining
Hi,
us.
thank you for having me.
So we will be taking live questions in the chat box. If you have any questions that come up, you can go ahead and post them and I'll try my best to get to them. But I just wanted to do an introduction of Frida. So she's a New York Times, Amazon Charts, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Sunday Times, and Publishers Weekly best-selling author, Frieda McFadden. And she is a practicing physician specializing in brain injury who has penned multiple best-selling psychological thrillers and medical humor novels. Frida's work has been selected as one of Amazon Editor's Best Books of the Year. She is the winner of the International Thriller Writers Award for Best Paperback, and she is a Goodreads Choice Award winner. Her novels have been translated into over 30 different languages. Frida lives with her family and Black Cat in a centuries old three-story home overlooking the ocean with staircases that creak and moan with each step, and nobody could hear you if you scream, unless you scream really loudly, maybe. Um, so thank you for joining, Frida. I think I'll just get started with some
Sure.
questions that I had, and then we can take some from the audience as well. So Frida, you've written over 25 books, as I mentioned in your bio, and many of them are psychological thrillers, but you also write women's fiction. Which do you prefer?
So I think I actually have only written 22 books. So at my last interview, which was only a week ago, they mentioned 22. So that's the only reason I know. I don't actually know based on my own counting. But the women's fiction was sort of like how I started. It were kind of semi-autobiographical. But I've always really loved thrillers and reading them and writing them when I was younger, like as a child. And I have basically just been writing thrillers for most of the last 7, 8 years. So I've kind of segued and I keep thinking, oh, maybe I'll write another women's fiction novel someday, but I keep coming back to the thrillers. So maybe someday, I don't know.
Okay, that's fascinating. So the psychological thriller landscape has a lot of competition. How hard is it to come up with new ideas for you?
The ideas themselves are not hard. I mean, they're kind of everywhere, and you can go with something really small and then just make it your own. I think the hardest part of writing them is the twist. So I have an ideas folder or an ideas draft email in my inbox. And anytime I come up with an idea, I write it there. But the problem is that I have a lot of ideas, but the twists are harder, and I want them to be really cool before I write anything. So that's the part that keeps me from writing all these ideas. It's like not having the twist to go with the idea.
I'm just wondering because I myself, this is my first book that I've read, The Housemaid that you've written. And I like the way that it was structured into the different parts. And the twist was revealed, I believe, in part two, with a shift of perspective. And I'm wondering if that's kind of the structure that you follow for most of your other psychological thrillers, where the twist kind of reveals itself in the second act.
They're all a little different. Like I definitely have it's not the first book that I've organized that way. I have others. I don't want to say what they are because that would completely give it away. But I mean it's something I do. Sometimes there'll be one big twist at the middle and then later there's another one, or it could be, fewer twists throughout and then the really big one at the end. So I would be giving away things if I said more about
Okay.
other books, but it's definitely one of my structures. So you never know what you're gonna get.
Okay. Your folder of twists reminds me a little bit about writers that write comedy. I've heard of the word funny file, so they keep a file of their funny jokes. Yeah, so it's kind of the same sort of thing. Okay, so you're a physician, as we heard in your bio as well, and you specialize in brain injury. Does that make you approach your writing differently than other authors may, do you think?
Um, I think definitely when it comes to anything medical, I have like a large degree of like confidence that I'm going to get it right because, when I read things and it's medical, like medical fiction, and it's by someone who isn't in medicine or even somebody who is, like, I'm always kind of looking like thinking to myself, this isn't accurate, this isn't accurate. And, sometimes it's hard because they say, oh, you just have to do a lot of research. There are things that, no matter how much research you do, I just think like it's different when you're in there and living it. And you just see little details that you just would never know if you weren't there and doing it for like, 20 years. So, I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years. So it's just natural for me. And it's also easy. So I don't have to do as much research. I just be like, okay, I know this stuff. Not that I know everything about every field of medicine for sure. Like if I were writing about like, a surgeon, I'd probably have to do a little research because, all I've got was my one surgery rotation that I'm still traumatized by like 20 years later.
Right. So at our book club discussion, I was just recalling that we were talking about how long a person could survive without water and food, and we didn't know those things. And we were actually fact checking on the internet and finding out, it's 3 days without water. So that's interesting. Yeah, I think that it definitely those types of details you'd probably know offhand.
That is not something I know.
No?
People will
Okay.
say to me like, how long the dead body, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know that. That is not something they teach in medical school. Like they teach, like, I definitely have to look up how long, you can survive without fluids. I mean, you have, like if I have a patient who like isn't drinking, I know they need fluids, but I'm not thinking to myself, well, if I don't give them fluid for 2 days, they'll die. I mean, I
Right.
hope it's not coming to that point. So I think that, those are definitely the creepier details, like how long does a dead body smell? Like, no, these are not things I have like at the tip of my tongue. Like these are things I definitely have to look up. So
Right. So I just have a comment in the chat box saying that I'm sure there are a lot of psychological thriller authors on the Homeland watch list because of their Google searches,
yeah,
which is
if
true.
my Google search is pretty, it would be pretty horrifying if somebody saw it. I don't know how people wrote before Google. Like, I don't know how I would ever write a book. Like, I would have to go to the library and I'd have to eventually learn the Dewey Decimal System, which I managed to avoid through my entire childhood. Because like, there's so many things. I Google like a billion times through my book. Like it's, every little thing, like, I don't know, like a type of restaurant that's common in a certain area, or I don't know, something like that. Like, I mean, everything needs to be Googled. Like you want to get it
Right.
right.
Okay, I have some questions coming in. Ankita is wondering what inspired the characters of the housemaid.
Um, so definitely the little girl Cecilia was based on my daughter, who was at the time I wrote it like Cecilia's age. She was 9. So it was funny. She actually read the book a few years after it was published, and she was like recognizing all this stuff from it. And she's like, "This is," and telling everyone, like, "My mom based this character on me." So I based a lot of the children on that particular daughter of mine. So, I think all the protagonists are a little bit based on myself, like how I would behave in a certain situation, like, Millie getting pushed around by her boss. Like, okay, I don't work as a housemaid, but if you read The Devil Wears Scrubs, it's kind of a similar situation in a lot of ways. And that was based on my real life. Like, you're in this situation, you're in this job, and like you've got this boss, this person in charge of you who's just being terrible to you. And I know what that feels like. I've experienced that. So that was kind of my motivation for writing that character.
Okay. So how do you balance practicing being a practicing physician and also being a writer? Where do you find the time?
Um, Not really that easy. I actually, I was really proud of the fact for a long time that I was still working. Like I was, you know, like everyone I knew who was an author, like doing well, was giving up their day job and, becoming an author full time. And I just felt like, I felt like I valued my job a lot. It was really important to me and I wanted to keep doing it. And I was proud that I was like juggling everything and I was like doing it. But it's like it was really hard. And not just that, I felt like I wasn't giving my kids what they needed. And you think as your kids get older, I have one preteen and one teen, that they don't need as much from you, but it's not true. They still need a lot. And I felt like I was shortchanging them. And that was something that I really didn't want to do because how many years will I have left of, having my kids in the house with me? So I actually, over the summer, after struggling a lot to try to get everything done, I made the really hard decision to step back from my physician job. And now I'm doing it like 1 to 2 days a week instead of like was more kind of semi full time before. And it was really hard and I struggled with it. I only just left the job at the end of December. And I really felt very sad about it. And people I know can contest to the fact that I was having panic attacks. Like when I left the job, I was like, what did I do? I made a huge mistake. But, you know, I couldn't, I didn't almost didn't have a choice. Like there was no way to do both anymore. And I really just had to make a hard decision, one or the other. Like, am I going to do the job, the day job, or am I going to be an author? And I felt like, my passion lay with being an author. And also, felt like I had an opportunity that a lot of people don't get, like you know, people were loving my books and reading it. And that was what I was like wanting all these years. So I couldn't just like say, oh, forget it. Now that I've achieved this, I'm just going to walk away from it all. So I have to see where this all leads. I'm still working. So if in 5 years, 6 years, I decide, when my kids are out of the house, if I decide to go back, I will still have my license. I'll still, be practicing. So it was a very, very hard decision, but I think it was the right decision, even though I'm still like, if you catch me on the right day, I'm still panicking and like, I did the right thing. But,
Oh,
I think ultimately it was the only choice I could make.
well, it's good that you have that sort of flexibility with your job
Yeah.
and that you have the self-awareness to understand where you need to draw the line. Or do you have any patients that have recognized you as as
I
being the writer?
I wish. I I have like my dream, like the last well, forever, but like especially the last few months, hitting New York Times, I wanted to walk into a patient's room and just see one of them reading my books because they're always reading books. They've always got a book or
Mhm.
their Kindle, and I'm always like, "What are you reading? What's I've always done that because I love books, so I like want to discuss it with them, but um, not once have I seen anyone reading one of my books. I did see somebody once reading my friend Pamela Kelly. She's a women's fiction author, reading one of her books. And I said
Okay.
to the patient, I was like, "Oh my God, that's my friend's book." And we were all excited. We were both excited, me and the patient. And I was like, "Can I take a picture?" And she's like, "Yeah." So she put the book on her little tray table in front of her bed and we took the picture. And I said, I'm going to show it to her. So, that was exciting, even though it wasn't my book. I guess it would have been also exciting if it were mine. But you know, it could still happen. I'm still being patient. So you never know. Someday, maybe.
Yeah, I think that just from like a patient perspective, I probably wouldn't go pretend or like be reading a book if I knew that my doctor was the one who wrote it. I'd probably just bring it and ask you for his autograph.
Yeah, I think like out of context, you would never think that. Like, I have a lot of favorite authors, and if
Yeah,
they were sitting right in front of me, I wouldn't put that together. Like if I were at a bus stop
that's
and
true.
like even like Stephen King, like pretty recognizable, you were next to me at the bus stop, I'd just be like, okay, there's this guy next to me at the bus stop. I wouldn't even look at him, you know? Like I would
Mhm.
never recognize him.
Okay, someone wants to know where you get your inspiration for your twists because you look really sweet.
I am really sweet. Um, I was in school, I was on the math team, and I was like always really, really enjoyed like puzzles and like, like solving problems. So I feel like the twists are just like an elaborate problem that I'm solving for myself. Like I solve the problem and then I'm kind of setting the problem up for someone else to possibly solve, but hopefully not. But I think that's why I'm able to do the twist. Like I think it's my math brain. Like it has nothing to do with like writing.
That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. So can you please talk about your tagline for the book? From behind closed doors, she sees everything. So someone's saying that they found it confusing because is it referring to Millie or Nina? Because Millie was really in the dark until after Nina left.
An excellent question. I didn't write the tagline.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Like they kind of showed me the cover and I was like, okay. Like I really like the cover. It's like, I when I saw it, I was like, it's gorgeous. I saw the tagline, I was like, okay. I didn't I honestly didn't ask questions. And I have had a few people say to me, it's a little confusing. Like, yeah, it is. I think, it's like a marketing decision to use it. Um, I think, you know, I think it's a good tagline. I can't, if I were to say what I think it means, it would just be a guess. It would just be me interpreting somebody else's tagline. So it was
Okay.
not my brainchild.
Okay. Have you ever been given flack from readers for writing how Nina solved her situation by putting Millie in her situation instead?
I have not. I think because she does go back and help her, and just that her situation was so awful that I think people, sympathized with her, like what she'd been through and her desperation to get both herself and Cecilia out. But like in the end, I mean, I think it's ultimately a girl power book, Nina and Millie kind of work together and help each other. And I think that I love girl power stuff. Like that's, my kids will always say to me, like when there's a movie with girl power, they're like, Mom, you'll love this. It involves girl power. So, I of course am going to create something like that. Anything girl power. I'm like, yes.
So the way I'm interpreting what you're saying, you feel like Nina sort of enlisted Millie to help her and not just put her in a situation like replacing herself.
Yeah, she's like initially, she makes it seem like um she was gonna get Millie to replace her. But then when she reveals like she knows Millie's history of killing abusive men, like you realize that actually her plan was she wanted Millie to kill him. Which,
Right.
maybe that wasn't the best plan on her part, but she does go back to help her and she actually takes the blame for the murder. She like lets Millie off the hook. So I think the one thing I have never been criticized about is Nina being a baddie.
So I feel like when I read the book, I did interpret it as her, like there was a clear distinction between Nina's personality and Millie's personality, and Nina seemed like she didn't have it in her to step up against Andrew, and she
Yeah,
was. Even though she really wanted to, and Millie, I felt like she kind of enlisted her to help her because she knew that she had that sort of personality and would be able to defend herself.
right.
So
Yeah.
I that's what I kind of saw in the book. I didn't really think she was trying to put her in a difficult situation to escape
No,
herself.
no.
Yeah,
I mean, she could have like walked away and said, when Andrew was dead and said like, "Oh well, deal with that." But she didn't. She came back and she helped her. So like that's why it's like girl power.
right. Okay. I want to ask Frida if she's read The Last Mrs. Parrish and did it inspire her for The Housemaid?
I did read it. I read a lot of books about like domestic violence. Um, I'm giving away, I feel like I'm going to give away these books by talking about it too much. I've read all of them and because I'm an avid reader and they all kind of like I wanted to do something with domestic violence, but a little different or a lot different. My own take on
Right.
this trope that's been done, I think we all know quite a lot. So I wanted to just, do my own thing with it.
Okay. Um, how do you know what you want to write about next?
How do I know what I want to write about? I mean, I have my ideas folder, and it's whatever is kind of speaking to me in the ideas folder. I'll look through it. Like, there's usually one thing that's like really, like calling to me, like inspiring me. So that will usually be the next thing that I write.
Okay. So in The Housemaid, we meet three pretty deep and intense characters, Nina, Andrew, Millie. Who was the most interesting for you to write and who was the most difficult?
Um, I think that um I think that Andrew was difficult because like there needed to be when I initially wrote the book, there was less like motivation for what he did. He was just kind of a crazy, psychopath guy who like locking women in the closet. But with working with my editor, we talked about like, well, he needs a motivation. Like it's not enough. Like maybe in real life, you have somebody who's just like the crazy psychopath guy who doesn't have a motivation. That's just how he is. But in books, like you want to have more explanation for things that you don't get an answer for in real life. So we had to like come up with like a reason he was doing this. So that made it a little bit more challenging.
Okay. And was there one that was the most interesting for you to write? You said
Uh,
Andrew was the most difficult.
oh. Um, no, I mean, I think they were, like it was fun writing Millie. Like she's the one who gets continued from book to book. So
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So with that in mind, are there other books planned with Millie after The Housemaid's Secret?
well, there's one coming out in June.
Okay.
So it's already, written mostly. It's in the editing stages still. And that will be the last one. But
Okay.
it's sort of the conclusion of Millie's story. It's far in the future. I wanted it to be really different from the other books. I didn't want to just write The Housemaid again. Like I wanted it to be really different. So like putting it in the future when she's married with children, I'm like, this will be very different.
Oh, okay.
So
So
yeah.
it's not like a repetitive story. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. I try like I don't think I mean I don't know if you'll like it or not, but I'm hoping at least you won't say, oh, it's the same book again. But at least you won't have that.
I highly doubt it. With your twists, um, I think we'll be surprised.
Actually,
Uh,
my inspiration for writing it was when I recently at the movies saw you this won't make sense, but when I explain it, maybe it will. When I saw Spider-Man 3, I think what was
okay,
the last one? No Way Home or something with home in it, right? They all have
right.
home in it. The latest one. And yeah, no, it's not at all like Spider-Man, but it's just that I liked it so much, and it was the third in the series. And I was like, I always thought, oh, the third in the series can't be good. It's gonna be like, more of the same, blah blah blah. And then like I saw this third Spider-Man, and I was like, this is amazing. They like took everything I liked about the first two Spider-Man, and they made it into something different. And it was so cool, and I like really really like enjoyed it, and I was so impressed that they did that. So I kind of wanted to do something similar. I wanted to take everything that I loved and hopefully readers loved about the first two books and kind of like make it into something different and cool. So that's how Spider-Man 3 inspired The Housemaid is Watching. You would not know that from reading it, but it
So
was definitely.
you didn't plan to have a trilogy. They just kind of
Oh
came about.
no, I didn't
Because it's
even
hard
plan
to
to do a
have
second
that.
one.
It's hard to have like those foreshadowing throughout
Yeah.
the first two books to have the lead up for the third. So that must have been challenging.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, I don't write sequels for the most part. So I definitely was not planning that at all. Yeah, it just
Okay.
happened.
So why did you choose to have Enzo and Nina have a romantic relationship as opposed to just a friendship?
Um, that's just kind of how I am. I like, I mean, I felt like, I introduced this kind of like sexy male character and like he's not going to hook up with anyone, come on. So it had to
Right.
be in there. Like I would have disappointed myself if that didn't happen. So
Okay. That makes sense. So can you talk about your take on what Andy did to Kathleen, as we never know the details?
I mean, I think he, was abusive to her, and her dad knew about it, and she
Okay, I
got
sorry.
away.
Because so Kathleen was his ex-girlfriend. It just took me a second to remember.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and she got away, and it would have been, that was sort of why the detective kind of lets Nina walk for the whole thing, because he knows like this guy Andrew is like a terrible guy. So yeah.
Which book was your favorite to write based on the actual process of writing it?
Um, I've enjoyed writing most of them. Sometimes I'm writing one and I hate writing it. That can happen. But I really enjoyed one I recently really enjoyed writing was The Inmate. I really had fun with that one and I love the characters. I mean, it's not one of my most popular ones, but it was just one of those books that kind of came out exactly like I wanted it to, and I felt very attached to the characters after. And um, so that was a good one. That was what I like personally.
Okay. So we have a question that says, do you write the ending first or build the plot as you go? And I'm going to take a guess. I think you start with your twist.
Well, in my head, I always know what the twist is going to be before I
Right.
start writing, because you have to set it up. You can't like just come up with it at the end. I don't see how that's possible. But otherwise you end up doing a lot of rewriting going back. But when I'm actually writing, I write it chronologically. So I start at the beginning and I just kind of move forward. And I don't skip around.
Okay. Um, so you went on to write The Housemaid's Secret. Many of our members have read that. For those who haven't, can you tell us a bit more about where the book picks up and what we can expect from it without, I guess, giving away anything?
Yeah, I don't want to give away anything. It's about 5 years later. I think some people think that continues with Lisa, the woman in the epilogue. It does not. It's 5 years in the future. Millie is in school to become a social worker. And she is, with this boyfriend who's very handsome and perfect. And she gets a new job as a cleaning woman. And it's sort of what unfolds from that with this new family that she comes to work for. And it's set in a different place too. It's set in New York City.
Okay. So can you maybe tell us about what books you read and who your favorite authors are?
I mean, I love to read. I think one of my recent favorites has been Jennifer Hillier. She's awesome. I've read almost all of her books, like in the non-thriller arena. I really enjoyed Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think for both of them, I've read all but one. And I'm just like saving that last one
Okay.
for like, when I'm in like a book slump or whatever. And I also, going back, I really love Tess Gerritsen. She hasn't been writing as much lately, but I've read her entire Azilian Isles series. She's brilliant. She has amazing twists and books. I don't know how she does Boston physician power, but
Right.
she's great. And, going back, I also loved some of the oldie, Stephen King was an old favorite of mine when I was a kid. And F. Paul Wilson, another physician author, another big favorite of mine when I was younger, but not writing as much lately. But these are just, some the ones that come to mind. But I read what's popular. Like if everybody's loving a book, I'll read it, and I think I'm the kind of person who, if something's popular, I usually like it. Like I always like the books that get the hype. If something's on, number one or something on the Amazon charts, like I'm gonna like it. So
Right.
I read Fourth Wing, and I loved it.
Okay.
It was great. It was like, this
Yes.
is not like my usual genre, but I'm like, I don't know why, but I love this book. So
Okay. So your Goodreads ratings are wildly high. You've got around 800,000 reviews, and your rating is, I believe it's over 4.3 out of 5. So we're just curious if you read your reviews or you abstain from looking at them.
well, I definitely haven't read 800,000 reviews. I read them, I read them sometimes. Like, when a book is new, I definitely am curious what people think. So like, I'll read them the first like month or two after the book comes out, and then there's no way to keep up with it. And
Right.
I think I like reviews a lot. I think that some authors are like, I can't tolerate reading bad reviews. And I definitely see why people would feel that way. Sometimes they could be pretty brutal, and you have to like put on your, big girl pants to like, read them. But I also feel like I learn a lot from reading them. And I really I want to grow as an author. I want to know when I'm doing right and when I'm doing wrong. And I feel like as much as it can sometimes be painful to read these reviews, like if I'm going to learn something from it, if I could do something different and better, because, and it's not going to be one review, but if like, 100 people within the first, 200 reviews all say something similar, then I have to take that seriously. Like I want to know what people think. I genuinely want to know, even if
You're
it's
brave.
painful. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna take the last question. Where is your favorite place to read or write? Do you have a favorite place?
In my living room sofa. I
Okay.
think I'm like almost melded with it at this point. I do everything there.
All right. So that it was great chatting with you, Frida. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of fun. Thank you
And we look
everyone for
forward,
coming.
yeah, we look forward to
Appreciate
seeing
it.
what's next. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.